Andrew Pitcher, welcome to the Pre-Construction Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
I cannot wait to get into this with you. I've been following your career for a couple of years now. You'll have heard me talk on the podcast about data analytics, how important it is to the construction industry, and you are the subject matter expert that I'm going to drill on today.
All right. Sounds good.
You look
I'm excited
scared.
for it.
Don't be scared. Good. So I always like to start, Andrew. Obviously, we'll get into loads as the podcast go on, but I always like to start at the beginning because I looked at your background, construction science degree out of Texas A&M. Was it always construction for you? Was it always construction science?
Uh, it was not. I started out in engineering like a lot of people, and I did pretty well in it. I had decent grades, but at the end of my first semester, I was like, this is not for me. I want something a little more hands-on. I had an engineering class where we had a big project to build a transmission or something out of a giant Lego set. And it had to go forwards and backwards and have three speeds. And doing that, I was like, you know what? I enjoy the actual building of this a lot more than I do the engineering part of it. So I'll look for something else. And one of the guys in my class was like, hey, I'm getting out of this. I'm going to this construction science degree. And I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that. So I looked into it and I was like, well, this looks a lot cooler than what I'm doing now. I think I'm going to transfer to that. And so I did. I fell in love with it, and here I am. 15 years later.
Brilliant. How early on did you realize that the other degree just wasn't for you?
One semester.
I love it. I'll tell you why that's impressive, right? Because it took me 3.5 years of my degree to realize that I was in the wrong degree, and then
Oh wow.
I just had to finish it. So that's good. That's intuitive. So when you went, and then you liked it that much that you went and did a master's.
I did. It's actually kind of a weird, funny story. So my first internship with a really large company here, I was a field engineer intern. So I was out doing in-wall inspections and looking at EFIS and all sorts of stuff. One of the things that I was given was a work rate tracking spreadsheet, and it was very poorly done. There was not a lot of backup information. It was just really a lot of scratch work that was done every week. Um, so I took that and I was like, this is terrible. I can't figure out how to do these work rates because it didn't even have takeoffs or anything. So I was like, how do you get a rate without a takeoff for an area? So I did a lot of like back calculations and math and tried to figure out the takeoffs and worked it all out. I was like, this could be so much better. Like Excel has all these formulas and automations. Um, and I couldn't quite get the formulas to do what I needed. So I started learning at night and teaching myself Visual Basic for applications, which is kind of the programming interface underneath Excel. So you can build custom functions and custom macros and really program inside of it. So I kind of taught myself that overnight, and I built this spreadsheet where all you had to do was plug in a percent complete, and it would build everything for you. So it took what used to take 2 3 hours and boiled it down to about 10 or 15 minutes. So it was really awesome. Turned that in at the end of my internship, and the superintendents looked at it and they're like, "Oh, this is cool," and then just that was the end of it. they
Oh
they didn't
my
really they
God.
didn't really care. They're like, "Yeah, this is neat, but whatever." Um, and then I went back to school because that was my it was a spring internship, and I still had a semester left. So I went and I had a BIM class, and I was really good at that, and I really enjoyed it.
What made
And I
you
was so
what made you really good at it? Because even that instance with the superintendent, I mean, he should have been wrapping you up in cotton wool, going, when you're finished, you come work for me and you do more of this, only at a bigger scale. What was it that attracted you to BIM? Did you enjoy it? What made you so good at it?
um, I think I really just enjoyed it. I was good at the technical aspects of it. One of the things that we were assigned was building custom objects in BIM for safety. So you could like bring in any sort of safety objects. You could do more. I gotta think about this. Um, More analysis on how a job could be set up for safety. So if you had barricades and other things, but you don't want to have to custom build a lot of those objects because then it's not worth it. It takes too much time, too much effort, too much money. But if you have like a library of custom objects that you can just kind of drag and drop everywhere, it becomes really easy. So that became one of our assignments was, hey, build this object that becomes easy to do. So I did. And I went really, really deep into it and got really good at it to the point where my professor was like, I didn't even know you could do some of this stuff. So like what I would do is I would make everything parametric. So you could just drag it across. It would build and shape everything based on the distance that you drug it. You could customize everything. So thicknesses, spacings, all sorts of stuff. So it was really good and I really enjoyed it. I was good enough at it that I got a job offer out of it. So I actually started out my career as a BIM specialist.
Yeah.
I did coordination for a few years, then became a BIM manager and did all sorts of things. Um, but that those programming skills never really left, and that's what made me really good at some of the BIM stuff. Um, and one of my first assignments at my first job as a BIM specialist was it came from a superintendent who was looking to import some surveying data into AutoCAD. He's like, "Hey, you're the BIM guy. You should know how to do this, right?" And I'm like, no, not really. It's not something I've ever done before. So I just started doing a little research, figured out how to script it all based on the CSV that he gave me. And I was like, you know what? I can do this so much better. This takes a long time to set up. And it was only like 10 or 15 minutes. And I was like, this should be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, so I made some macros. So I was like, all right, I can just import this CSV. It'll do everything for me. And then I just go into AutoCAD and execute this script. I was like, but I can do one better. So I started calling AutoCAD from Excel. So I could just click a button, import a CSV, and it would call AutoCAD, run everything, and execute all of this stuff for me.
Wow.
And I was like, but you know what? I can do better. Why am I even doing this in Excel? Why don't I just do this as a program in AutoCAD? So I did that, and I built this huge plugin for it. And after about a year, the superintendent came back and he was like, you know, they sell stuff to do this, and it costs a lot of money, but I like yours a lot more. Um, and one of the PMs found out, and he's like, "Hey, I need you to make this spreadsheet that does this thing." And it was like an import for our project management system to like format a bunch of data. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's easy." And then he came back and he was like, "Well, you did such a good job at that. I want you to take this pay app that we have to copy every month. And I want a button that copies it and moves all this information and does all this stuff." And I was like, "Okay, I can do that." So I did that, but I was like, I can do it better. So I programmed all the business rules into it and I cross calculated all the columns in it. So you could enter in like a percent complete or a cost to date or material store to date, and it would calculate everything. It wouldn't let you overbill or underbill based on your previous. And he was like, wow, this is awesome. And everyone was really impressed by it. And I was still doing BIM, still doing everything. And then one day, the executives come to me and they're like, hey, we're getting a new accounting system and we saw this really cool integration with our project management system and we want you to do this. We want you to integrate it all. And I was like, sure, why not? Like I'll do it. I'll do any job. Um, so I ended up realizing that it was way different than anything I'd ever done before. I had to learn SQL and a lot of other things. We were setting it up with a third party middleware. So I learned a lot about that. I learned all about our operations processes, so change management, contracts, anything and everything, a ton about accounting. I actually learned so much about the accounting system that I became a subject matter expert for the accounting system.
Brilliant. Well,
And
that's
the
what
accounting,
happens. That's
yeah,
what
the
happens.
accounting clerks would come to me and they would be like, hey, we need to add this to this report or we need to make this thing happen. And I'd be like, oh, okay, well, the setting is over here and you do this and here's how this works. Um, so I got really good at that. And as a management tool to manage all these integrations and everything, I started building a lot of reports in Power BI, which was kind of brand new at this point. Um, and then some of the PMs saw it and they were like, oh man, this is awesome. Like I can see all my stuff in one spot. I can see accounting and project management in the same place. How come I don't have this? And I was like, well, let me build one for you.
So
So I
that's
started
how
doing that.
That's how it started. I mean, that to me, that just shows the skill set that you had to be able to put your hand at anything. So it wasn't just construction; it was the love for problem solving, but also the coding and being able to integrate things as well. Once you stripped all that back and looked at construction, did you see a load of things that you thought, "Oh my God, this is ancient, and I could do it so much better"?
Yeah, kind of. That is a big part of it. Like I was never really big into computers. I was actually very technology averse as a kid. We didn't have a computer until I was in probably like sixth or seventh grade,
Yeah.
which I mean, for my age is actually pretty late. Um, and so I'd always look at it as this like magic box, and I didn't want to touch anything or do anything that might break it. Because for us, it was a very expensive thing. So I was like, I don't want to do anything that could upset it or break it. And our first one was so old that um, you would have to go through a shutdown procedure, and then it would like stop the hard drive, and then you could physically turn off the power. It wasn't like you could just press the button and everything would turn off, or like you go to the start menu and just like turn off and everything would work. No, like there was a whole process that you had to do. Um, so I was very technology averse, and it wasn't until my internship and doing that first Excel project that I really started to get into it and enjoy it. But yeah, there are a lot of things in construction that are kind of ancient. I think it's one of those things where we look at projects as these one-off things where you have to go build it, and everything is new all the time. It's always different, and there's no like process or anything that you can automate. And people don't think about it that way. So everything is thought of as very manual.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
it's interesting. I mean, it has always been manual, as you say. It's always been like that. So people and don't get me wrong, there's been integrations that we know have run in the background that we're unaware of. But now it's a case of we can actually see a problem and get an integration to fix it, or a process or a piece of AI to go and do that. Tell me now, Andrew. You went into Bartlett Cocke, right? You're there now as data analyst and integrations manager. Did Bartlett Cocke, and the reason I'm asking this is there's loads of GCs, small, medium, large GCs that don't have or don't utilize their data. It's just literally they do a project and the data disappears. They don't use it. Did you have to start it from scratch at Bartlett Cocke? And if not, what would you advise, or what piece of advice would you give a contractor like that that's just starting out in their data journey?
so I didn't have to start out completely from scratch at Bartlett. Um, Bartlett approached me and hired me because they wanted to really kind of step up their game. Um, they had some good things in place, but I had known Luis Baruman, who's our VP of technology and strategy, I think is what his title is, from a lot of industry things. He was local here in San Antonio, and we'd actually taught a BIM class together back when he was, I think he was the BIM manager for a while here, but he's moved up since then. But he knew me and my skill set and kind of what I do and what I'm capable of. And he's like, hey, we really want to step things up. We have data. We want to use it better. Can you come help us with this? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, because I did come from a company where everything kind of had to be built from scratch. When I originally joined that company, they were just starting to use a project management system and get off of Excel. Um, and in building a lot of integrations and building a lot of dashboards and using data for the first time, a lot of people there were like, hey, yeah, we're going to use this data and everything's going to be great. And there was this feeling that like, oh, we're like super modern and everything. I was like, no, a lot of the data that we have is actually pretty bad because people never thought about how it was going to be used years later. It was just kind of, hey, go out and get the job done and do whatever you need to do to deliver the project. And there was no thought of, well, how are we going to use all this later? So there were things that weren't filled out, like project descriptions or square footages. Um, Project costs weren't always super well documented. So it's kind of a garbage in, garbage out kind of a thing. And it wasn't until, much later on that the data started getting really clean and usable. So people thought like, we've been on this system for like 9 or 10 years. We've got 9 or 10 years worth of data. And I was like, no, you really only got like maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So there's
And,
not nearly as much that you can work with.
and a lot of people don't understand that. Am I right in saying that you then obviously have got to go back through the previous project that you did, pick data points and pick it up from them, but then going forward from that date when you've decided, right, we're going to use data, pick the data points that you want, and then continuous and be consistent with putting them in there like that.
Yeah, you've got to set everything up kind of with that end state in mind. So, and you've got to look at it as a whole company. You can't think of it as delivering a project. That to me goes back to that kind of manual mindset of how people have traditionally approached construction, of it's delivering a job instead of using a process.
Yeah.
Like every building is built the same. You always build every building from the ground up. Um, and it's foundations, structure, roof, finish out. It's the same every time. Your change management process never changes. RFIs never change. Submittals never really change. You may change tools, but the process itself should be fairly consistent. And you need to think that out. And not just from a project delivery standpoint, but from a business standpoint. Your business processes need to be set. They need to be consistent. And you need to have people who consistently engage in those processes. So things like business development, pre-construction, estimating, um, all those things need to be consistently documented and updated. Like you can have 10 years of business development information, but if it's not consistently input, if it's not consistently recorded, then it's not going to do you any good. So if you're not recording project values and interactions with clients, how the go no go decision was made on particular projects, and what the project statuses are and how those change over time, then none of that information really means anything. It's dirty. It's not really usable. It's unreliable. Same thing with estimating. Like if you're not adequately recording estimates and all your bid numbers from subs, and if it's not consistent, then you can't use that information. And you've got to understand how it goes downstream as well.
Yeah.
Like the holy grail of job creation for a lot of companies is you started out in business development and they track it until you're awarded, and then it just magically goes into your project management system or your estimating system or both. And then from there, like everyone does all the stuff that they need to do, and then it just magically goes into accounting and wherever else it needs to go. But that doesn't work if you don't have all the information and processes necessary in business development um, to make that happen in the first place.
Yeah.
Or like in estimating, if you don't have the processes in place to adequately budget a job and estimate it, and then take that and push it into project management and hand it off, um, none of that information matters.
So am I right in saying what you're saying is, I mean, I always thought obviously pre-construction and estimating, it was the point where you need to get your data points right and your standardization of how you do all projects and it so you're saying it actually is business development before that, before you've even won the project.
Yeah, it starts there. I've seen at a different company, um, the business development system was set up to a point where your vertical markets and how they were tracking pursuits didn't match the vertical markets and how accounting, project management, and estimating were tracking projects. So
Uh,
you had a huge mismatch in categories, and so it's like how can you take the projects that you've done and say, hey, here's the work that we've done in these vertical markets, and here are examples of projects that we've done for proposals. Um, if you don't even have that match made. So
yeah.
if business development is tracking it totally differently, then how do you do that? And if you're doing that in business development and then you pass that off to estimating or project management, well, now the project is automatically classified wrong, or you don't even have a classification for it, and so you can assign it wherever you want. So you've got to think through a lot of those things and processes and think, where does a job really start? how does it flow through your entire business process, from business development, from just an idea in someone's head to a fully fleshed out and built building that you've turned over to the owner that's through warranty. And how do you track everything through that?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, because like things like costs of, how much money did you make on a project? And for a lot of people, that's, well, how much did we get paid and how much did we spend on it? Well, okay, but how do you figure self-perform into that? How much money did you make off of self-perform? How much money did you make off of equipment rental, and renting equipment to yourself? And what was your actual profit on that job? Because you can lose money on fee and still make money on self-perform and equipment. And a job that looks like a loser on paper, from just a you went over budget standpoint, could actually make you a fair amount of money depending on where your profit centers are on the job. So you have to look at it as a holistic business process and not just, how do I go out and build a building?
Yeah, yeah. And that's that understanding of how, business development right through a project. How important is it once the project's complete, as you say, you go back through the data and update the data and just talk to the data and almost edit the data to say, okay, we originally thought through pre-con and estimating that this was going to be the figure, but in actual fact, these 2 3 things happen and this was the figure.
Um, it's really important, because it's really hard to go through all of that information and figure those things out, if things aren't recorded properly. So if you're not really well documenting things, and that's really difficult to do, because people think like, oh, I just need to get this job out the door and I need to get done. And it happens in every department. So like BD may not document everything fully, or estimating may not document everything fully. Or operations may not document everything fully. It's like, well, why do I need to fill out this box, or why do I need to fill out this thing? And it's usually because someone needs to use it downstream. But unless you're outside of your bubble and you're outside of kind of your comfort zone in your department, and you understand what other people are doing, and how your job impacts them, people tend not to do that. Once you get that kind of culturally down of, hey, we need good data because other people use it, and if I get good data for them, they're going to get good data for me. That really helps. So it's kind of a cultural thing.
And how difficult is that? Because culturally, you know yourself, change, no one likes change, especially if it looks completely different to how they did things. You talked recently at Advancing Analytics, or about the integrating software to streamline info through the teams. How difficult is that?
Cultural change is kind of hard. And I think it's one of those things where you have a lot of experience that actually outdates a lot of technology. And I was thinking about this the other day, where, like, especially in estimating, where we have estimators who are phenomenal at what they do. They've been doing this for 30 or 40 years, and you give them a square footage and a rough idea of what a project is, and they can give you a pretty good estimate, and they can be off by maybe 5 or 10%. On a final cost. I'm like, that's incredible that they have so much knowledge that they can do that. But that all predates estimating technology. So things like on-screen takeoff, or like any 3D takeoff software or estimating software, conceptual estimating stuff, that is really good, and it draws off a lot of data and experience. But it's really hard to train someone who has that innate knowledge already. Hey, we need you to use this and do this because we want to document all of this. This is how we want to do it now, when they can do it so much easier just by thinking about it. I don't want to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but that's why, because this software may be 5 or 10 years old, and at this point in their career, these people can do it faster. They can do it better in some cases, because they are drawing on so much knowledge and so much experience, and they don't have a whole lot of time left in their careers. So it's like, why would I spend a lot of time doing this when I can just give you the answer and get this job out the door? And it's really hard to get people in this mindset of it's not about the job in front of you. It is about the process that the business is going through, and it's about setting up the next 10, 15, 20 years of the business and setting up the data in order to support that process. Like I don't care about today. I care about the next 10 or 20 years. And people get so caught up in what's in front of them and the project that they're doing right now that they lose focus of that long-term vision.
Yeah. And that's the
So
key. I mean, it's happening all over the US. I'm dealing with it myself. It's knowledge retention. It's being able to download the brains of these geniuses that have been doing it like that for 40 years. And then obviously the next generation being able to teach them how to think like that, but also to get the data into the system so that they don't have to put as much pressure and it's not as reliant on them independently. The actual technology and the data will be able to spit out the numbers and be more efficient essentially.
yeah, and that's something where I think AI is probably going to help out a lot, and where I see a lot of value is that traditionally unstructured data has been really hard to get at. So like if you look at lessons learned, that's a really good one. I've seen a lot of lessons learned databases, and it's really hard to tag information and recall information because you can, and you've got someone who's got to go in and like look for a lesson learned. You've got to be pretty proactive about it, and that's very difficult for people because they've got things to do, and it's really hard to like you're basically looking at an encyclopedia of construction knowledge and lessons learned, trying to look for something, but you may not know what you're trying to look for. You just kind of know like what activities you're doing or what your project is, and you have this vague idea, but it's really hard to go through structured data and find that kind of stuff because you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Whereas AI can read a lot of those lessons learned, and you can ask it, "Hey, I've got this project that I'm working on. What should I know?" And if you have like an AI tool set up that is trained on that data, um, or is it has access to that, it can look at it and be like, oh, well, on previous projects like yours, here are these things that happened that were lessons learned. So it becomes a lot easier to mine all that unstructured stuff. Um, so there's less of a focus on getting it correct as much as just like putting it down. So you can have those people who have that great experience, and as long as they're kind of filling that out and writing that narrative, you can get that a lot easier now. And I think that's going to be a huge impact for the industry.
Well, it's basically saving the lives of general contractors that haven't really been looking at the data. It's almost a cheat sheet and a kind of an accelerator to get into where the companies that did structure their data and have been keeping their data, they can also almost now cheat and get AI to go and look through all the and rummage through all the files, whether that be videos, images, or Excel cells.
There, there is a certain advantage, but I think those companies that have been really good at structuring their data and documenting it and keeping it accurate definitely have an advantage already because they have a lot of data that's useful. And like LLMs are really good at reading things and kind of understanding context and delivering you stuff. But they're not so good at things like financial predictions. You need different kinds of models for that. And those typically need like very structured data. They need good, like high quality data that is very reliable. And those companies that have spent a long time building those data sets that are reliable, structured, accurate, they're going to have that advantage of we've got the data to build those kinds of models on and make those sorts of decisions on. But those that have just been kind of winging it and just go out and deliver a project and then walk away from it and deliver the next one and walk away from it and don't have those consistent processes in place to consistently build that data, they're going to be kind of at a disadvantage because even with the best AI system you can build, like the holy grail of like generalized AI, if you train it on garbage, it's gonna spit out garbage.
Yeah.
So it's gonna tell you based on your data lies basically,
Yeah.
because what you've given it to go off of isn't accurate. I mean, it's like if you taught kids that the sky was green, growing up, they're going to tell you the sky is green as adults once they've learned everything there is to learn. And as far as they know, it is, because that's what you taught them, and that's what their books told them and what you told them. But the sky is still going to be blue.
Yeah.
And so it's everything that you teach it. If you teach it wrong, it's going to deliver incorrect results. So you need that accurate, reliable, and consistent data to start with.
Brilliant. I love it. Well, folks, that is an incredible start. This is episode 1 of Andrew Pitcher talking about data analytics and data. I can't wait to get into episode 2. Episode 2, we're going to be talking about the custom cost forecasting tool that you have that connects to your data warehouse. I mean, that to me that's going to that as you said, we're talking about the structured data, being able to get the tool to talk to the data, they spit out the answers. That is the holy grail, and I can't wait to talk about it in episode 2.
All right, awesome. Looking forward to it.
Speak to you soon.
All right, thanks, Gareth. Have a good one.